2.
Hi, my name is Philip Cronky. I'm a student here at BSU at the Headwater Science Center today, which is open 9:30 to 5 Monday through Saturday and 1 to 5 on Sundays. Today we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on the book that Lee read on Wednesday called Blackout. So basically what this book was about was a family that is controlled by electricity. They're on their phones, on their computers, but then all of a sudden there's a blackout. So they lose their electricity, they lose those electronics. So they have to figure out what to do. And then eventually they go out into the natural light outside. They create their own little forms of light with shadows, play little games, got the starlight, and then eventually they add a little bit of candlelight, flashlights, battery-powered light, stuff that's not directly sent through generators and lines. And then finally, once the blackout is fixed and the generators are sent back on, they get electricity again with the click of a light. So today we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this and talk a little bit about what is light, how is that made, what else produces light, and how we get the electricity to produce that light. So to start, what is light? Light is basically defined as what we can detect with our human eye, or what is found on the electromagnetic spectrum that comes through the radiation from the electromagnetic forces. So the electromagnetic spectrum, the EM, stretches from wavelengths of 10 to -18, which is a super small number. That's 16 zeros in front of this 10. So super small wavelengths, all the way to radio waves of 100,000 meters or 100 kilometers. In between these, there's the gamma, then there's the X-ray, the ultraviolet spectrum, and then the very small visible light spectrum, of which we see in, and then the infrared, the microwave, and the radio waves. So with the visible light, we're talking about the colors that reflect and absorb from the sun. So the sun sends out white light, and then that light is then reflected or absorbed by the colors that we see. So if you have a green shirt on or you have a gray shirt on, you're seeing the color that's reflected and not the colors that are absorbed. So the sun sends all those colors to you, and it only reflects that one color or the mixture of colors that create that color. So with that, we can do like a little experiment here with this, and how we start off with blue, and then you can slowly make your way into more of a cyan, and then back into more of a pink, into, hold on here, a yellow, and then finally back into red. Red is the largest wavelength that we see, at 700 nanometers, or 3 times 10 to the third.
So what you're doing when you're changing colors there is you're just changing the wavelength.
Exactly, changing the wavelength, increasing that frequency that we see. So inside of the spectrum, there's wavelengths we can talk about, and there's also frequencies. And in the frequencies, that's talking about how fast these wavelengths get. And the wavelength distance is right here, the distance, and that's going from here to here. So as we get farther along the EM spectrum, that gets farther apart. And it also gets slower. So you're getting a very slow wavelength there, which then reduces what we can see, as we can only see within that visible light. So then to bounce back with a little bit of a fun fact here, with the reflection and what we actually see in colors. Get this off, looking a little pink. So the sun reflects that white light, and then it sends all these colors to us, and that's kind of why a darker shirt, like a black shirt, will feel warmer, because it's absorbing more of that energy from the sun, reflecting less of the colors. It's absorbing all the colors, is why you see black. But when you wear white, it's reflecting all the colors, absorbing less heat. So it's kind of like a heat and color dynamic. So what else does produce light? We're talking about artificial light and then natural light. So artificial light is anything that people make. So we got man-made fires, we got light bulbs, headlights, lamps, flashlights. So it's basically just light that we create ourselves. And then the opposite end is natural light, which is light that we don't create. So we got the sun, we got animals such as like jellyfish, glowworms, fireflies, for example, but also fire. Fire can also be naturally made, so it's a tricky in between there, because fire can then be man-made and it also can be naturally made. So it can be artificial and natural. So what I'm going to do a deeper dive in through the book is the use of artificial light in light bulbs that we do have, and then how that energy, how we produce that energy and how it gets to us to make those light bulbs light. So at night, we're forced to use that artificial light as the star lights from here won't create enough light for us to see at night to do what we want to do at night. So the four most popular types of lights are going to fall in the category of light bulbs. And those are the incandescent, the LED, the CFLs, which are the compact fluorescent lights, or fluorescent lights as commonly said, and then the halogen lights right here. So I'll start off with the incandescent lights. So these are the most common but also least expensive. They're like the older light bulbs that you see in like lamps and stuff like that. They produce a warm yellow light. And this is because they glow due to the tungsten, or a metal filament that is considered to be electrical resistant. So it can actually glow without burning. So it has a high melting point without burning. So yeah, it's gonna glow rather than burn.
So these are unique in that these are the light bulbs that are hot when you touch them too.
Yeah, they're not necessarily the hottest. There's gonna be hotter. I will talk about that later with the halogens, but they are very warm. So they're not gonna be like an LED that are gonna be cold to a touch. They create the light through heat. And then the next one is LEDs. You can see with your LED strips, the ones that have fancy colors. These are really efficient lights, energy efficient. They're very technologically advanced. They get off no heat. They contain no mercury, like the CFL bulbs I'll talk about in a second. And then they also produce a bright white light rather than a yellow light, because they're not using heat or a filament to burn to create that light. So they actually create the light through the electrical current passing through the diode, which is what the D stands for in LED, which then emits photons or light through the idea or the process of electroluminescence. And then the next light bulb I'll talk about are the CFLs, or fluorescent lights. These are more of the ones that you're going to see in the hallways at school, the ones that are right here, the ones that create a lot of broad light for areas. They're not necessarily used for areas, small areas, or like closets. They take a little while to warm up and get bright. So they're used to expand light rather than focus light, as LEDs are most known for. And in these CFLs, the fluorinated lights, they're actually made with methane and argon gases, which are not so good for us. They're a little bit toxic, so you want to be very careful with them. You don't want to break them, otherwise you're going to be inhaling those fumes. And those gases are actually what allow that tube to light up. So when that electrical current passes through the end pieces right here, the gases inside will react with the electrodes, which are these two end pieces, and then create that light.
And this is similar to how, like, you see like a neon sign on a store, kind of using the same type of thing, just with different gases.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not too sure exactly what those gases are.
Neon.
Neon. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. You got that one.
But yeah,
there you go.
Different gases make different colors.
Yeah. And then you also see these kind of lights in these fancy little twisty bulbs. They got a whole bunch of little turns in them. Those are, as of late, I think they've gotten banned because of the toxicity that they've created. People are throwing them in garbages and they're not recycling them properly. So you're not seeing many of these, but you're seeing more of these and more of the LEDs now as technology has advanced. And then the last light bulb I'm going to talk about is the halogen light bulb. These are the ones that get super hot. They're typically seen underneath like cabinets, some ceiling fans. They also have them in some motorized vehicles. Inside this, they also have a tungsten filament, so they're similar to the incandescent light bulb, where they have to burn to create heat to create that light. And inside this, the light, the electrical current is sent to that filament. The filament then burns, and then the gas, the tungsten gas that evaporates off of it, reacts inside the bulb, creating more heat, creating that light, and then it's kind of like recycled into the filament again, so that it doesn't blacken or change the color of that light bulb. So through this, how do we actually get that electricity? How do we get that energy to get into these light bulbs to produce our light? Most of our energy actually comes from non-renewable sources, unfortunately, as we see now we're moving towards more renewable, but the non-renewable sources are still more efficient and they're cheaper for us, so we decide to go with those. So the energy that is created to light up these light bulbs, to light our light or dark spaces, will be often generated through natural gas, coal, maybe nuclear energy, not so much just for our typical building lights. And then also renewable sources such as hydropower, biomass, wind, geothermal, and solar power. Mostly in the United States, it's going to be coal or natural gas for us. It's really cheap, we have a lot of it, and it's really efficient at creating energy. And through this process, they burn the gas, or they burn the coal, and it creates steam. And then that steam is then used to push a turbine, or it's used inside of a combustion turbine, and that turbine creates a rotation with the mass, and then creates energy through basically kinetic energy. So what is kinetic energy? It's the energy that moves. It's movement of energy. And then potential is the opposite, which is stored energy, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. So once we create that energy, this energy then has to be converted into other forms of energy, right? It has to be stored, or they have to be used. And this is because we can't just store electricity itself, so it has to be transformed. So when we convert the energy from the potential energy, is pushed into electricity, that electricity then is reconverted into something that can be stored. So it's more into like, it's a reverse method in a way to put it back into a potential stored form, such as pump storage hydropower. It's the idea of pumping water down, recycling it back up, and then that rotation then stores energy itself, and then it can then be sent out on demand when we need it. There's also other ways of storing electricity, such as batteries. Those are pretty common for short-term power. Flywheels, which are found in a lot of engines. And those are basically just like mechanical battery. They use like a mass rotation to transfer the power. And then we also have compressed air, which is a little bit more new. It's the idea of pushing air into like its own little concealed container, and then when we need it, we can release it, and it will create a spinning rotation similar to the other ones that rotate mass around, producing that kinetic energy from that potential energy. So further which, once that energy is then reconverted from that potentially stored energy back into kinetic moving energy, it will travel through transmission lines, which are the super large high voltage lines that you see along highways, alongside farms. These ones send direct current or alternating current through the lines, most likely alternating current, which is AC, and then that is the safer method per se. Direct current is a lot. There's DC and then there's AC current. So the DC current is high voltage current, which is sent directly and can't be reduced as efficiently as AC current. That's because direct current is more like a straight line. Doesn't have any alteration to it, but a alternating current is much more like what we see with the EM spectrum along a line. So we have higher voltage as you go up and lower voltage as you go down. And when the alternating current goes up and down, it's a lot easier to stabilize and choose the amount of energy that you want without having some kind of an explosion, which what DC current can cause sometimes, just because we don't always need that much power. And DC current can actually help cause blackouts, unfortunately. So what we see most of the time is AC current traveling through our big, large white towers that send that electricity through its transmission lines, and then that power is then sent to substations, which are like transforming stations. So you see those in like cities. We have transformers. Those are in like small neighborhoods, but then when you get to more of a confined area where all of our energy comes in, we have these large gaps, these large grids that hold all of that energy coming in, reduces it for us, so we can send down into regular power lines, which you see in ditches of wooden poles, and then those lines take our electricity to the transformers or to our houses, to our electrical boxes. There's also ground lines, which have been seen to be more proactive as of late. We don't have to repair them as often. They're not getting damaged by trees or natural disasters and stuff like that. People not running into them with their cars.
So when you say ground lines, you mean like buried lines?
Yeah, buried lines.
Not like
yeah.
Grounding electrical.
No, not like that. Not like the neutral that keeps us from shocking each other. But the underground lines, sealed in a PVC pipe, I believe, just to help reduce any having to repair or reduce the potential of blackouts happening. Because if those power lines go down, a block might lose power for a couple hours until it's repaired. So once that electricity is then sent to our house, we're able to use it. It's sent to electrical boxes. So each building's gonna have an electrical box where it has circuit switches, circuit breakers for each room or each outlet that has a high amount of voltage is sent to it. So like your refrigerator might have its own circuit breaker. Your laundry machines will have their own circuit breaker. They take a lot more energy to produce what they're meant to do. The appliances take a lot more electricity.
So like the Science Center has 4 separate panels that all have about 40 breakers in them in this building.
Yeah, and as you can see,
40, yeah. There's probably about 160 breakers that we have just in the Science Center.
This building takes a lot of energy to keep it running, along with its heat. I mean, you got your heaters that are also on your circuit breakers. So after the circuit breakers, each of those lines then go to their separate rooms, and that's where switches come into play. Instead of having to switch off the circuit breaker to turn it off and cut off the circuit, or turn on and turn off the light, we can have light switches that turn off or cut off the circuit. So the light switch essentially cuts the electrical current from getting to its source, or its member that it's trying to get to, the light bulb, for example. It's stopping the filament from heating up. It's keeping that electricity that it needs to heat up the tungsten for it to light from getting there. So it just stops that, keeps it off, keeps that electrical current away from it. But then again, it also helps it turn back on. So overall, that's basically how electricity gets to where it needs to be for our uses. Um, but what happens if a blackout happens? Like what causes that to happen? That usually happens when one of the towers break down. If there is damaged parts along the process of a tower transformer blows, the substation has a part that's gone bad, it's been overpowered. For example, like if the alternating current wasn't stabilized correctly, then there's too much energy in there, so it burns out in a way, or there was a direct current that got in there. Um, or there's just
So
a faulty line. Yeah.
and so a lot of times, like you'll see blackouts that happen in like one specific area. It's not like everything attached to a power plant blacks out.
Right. That's typically not what's going to happen. It's typically like a transformer, like a neighborhood, like or just a building. The panel, the electrical panel,
So like
shoots out.
when like we get power outages here at the Science Center, I also get them at my apartment because we're presumably on the same transformer somewhere along the line.
Yeah, you're on the same circuit path.
But like, Peggy, who with me at the front desk, doesn't get the same power outage as I do because she's on a different part of the power grid.
Exactly. Like I believe that everything that's actually past, I want to say 6th to First Avenue down here in Bemidji is relatively in the same grid. There's gonna be multiple transformers in there because there's a lot more energy being produced. That of then the neighborhoods that are just past that, like just past downtown here. So they're gonna have their own little breakers and their own transformers because it's a different kind of energy that they need. Downtown's gonna need a lot more, residential not as much.
Most neighborhoods don't have a building that needs as much power as the Science Center does.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have those 4 electrical boxes that have 40 circuits in each one to keep this place running and up and going. So yeah, that's basically a little bit about light bulbs and how we get our energy, our light. What keeps us going as a society. Without light, without artificial light, where would we be? We would have less than 12 hours in the day to do stuff. It's really allowed us to advance. So thank you, light. Thank you, light bulbs. Thank you, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, all those historical engineers that have allowed us to get where we are today. Because without them, we probably wouldn't be here in a couple hours. We would have no light in this building.
Couldn't keep all of our reptiles.
No. Exactly. So that's a little bit it for the talk about light and electricity and about how we get it. Again, my name's Philip Cronky, BSU student, Bemidji State University, Environmental Studies. The Science Center is open from 9:30